Today's video is about cybercrime, which is becoming a very relevant and pressing problem. As you will see from the conversation I had with Professor Abby Hong from Trinity, who I was lucky enough to interview, cybercrime is very different from traditional crime. Common forms of cybercrime include hacking into government and company databases or stealing people's personal information. For example, recently in Israel, an LGBTQ dating site was hacked into. The hackers blackmailed the site's users by threatening to release their data on the dating site. Of course, people don't want that kind of information out there, and so they were likely to pay the blackmailers. Another example is this malware, which is a bad software called the Trojan horse, which is sold on the dark web, which is basically an online black market. And this malware looks like unharmful software, but it is actually very harmful, like a virus. But before we start, let me tell you a little bit about Abby's research. She and Dr. Nielsen wrote a paper called Cybercrime and Punishment. It showed that cybercrime and traditional crime have to be dealt with very differently because they are so different. They actually came to a conclusion that you might find counterintuitive, that in cybercrime, it is the victim who should be punished, which sounds weird, right? But you'll hear more about that in the video, and I hope you enjoy. So I was thinking, would it be okay for you to give a quick recap of your paper, Crime and Punishment, and explain what you researched and what conclusions you came to?
Thank you for getting interested in my paper, co-authored with Dr. Nielsen, who is my advisor. We work on this paper for years and finally get it published. So this paper is about the effective punishment on cybercrimes. So you know whether the current punishment is effective or not. When we look at the data in the past 20 years, in the US, originally the reported loss due to cybercrime was about just $18 million. But nowadays, this number becomes over $10 billion, increased by over 500 folds. So that is a huge increase from 20 years ago till now. And the reported loss is just part of the iceberg, right? Because for many companies, they don't report, they're not willing to report that they've been hacked by the hackers and they lost their customers' data, because like doing so, it will cost a lot to their reputation, and they may lose their customer as well. So you may heard some cybercrime stories, like the FBI caught a few cybercriminals in the past. One of the very popular case in the US is Aaron Schwartz case. So Aaron Schwartz is a very talented computer programmer, and he's also a research fellow at Harvard University. However, he got caught by the FBI while downloading hundreds of articles from JSTOR without the permission. So JSTOR is a digital online library. So Aaron Schwartz, he believed that downloading these articles and share with the public so the public can have free access to those knowledge is a good thing. So that's why he did that download without permission. However, it is a crime. It is still a crime. And eventually he was sentenced with 50 years in jail and also a $1 million fine. So it's like, even though this is a non-crime, is a non-violent crime, so just downloading the articles from an online library is a non-violent crime. It cannot be comparable with murder or robbery or sexual assault. However, he got more severe sentence than those crimes we call violent crime. So the logic behind is most people believe that we need to impose severe punishment on cybercrime because it is very hard to catch and successfully convict those cyber criminals. So we need to punish them severely in order to deter them in the first place. However, will that work? My paper work with Dr. Nielsen, we find that sometimes severe punishment on cyber crimes do not work effectively to deter them in many circumstances.
Okay. So based on that conclusion, are there other ways of correcting behavior that are more effective?
So according to our model, we find actually probably the more effective way is to punish the victim. In here, don't get me wrong, in here, the victim refer to many big companies who are the data producers, data processors and holders. Usually that's the case. Because they derive a lot of benefit from using those consumers' data. So by punishing them, can provide them a lot of incentive to better protect the consumer's data. I know right now in the Europe, you are working, you have a regulation called GDPR is doing that. And in the US, I know some Senator Amy Klobuchar and also the John Kennedy are pushing a similar bill. So hopefully by punishing those victims, they can protect our data better. You may remember several years ago, there was a big data breach from the Equifax. Equifax is a American organization trying to give you evaluate your credit for each one of the US citizens. However, because they just forget to update one of their patch in the network, they get breached and they lost over 145 million consumers' account information, including their social securities and so on. And also the Target, because they couldn't protect their customers' data very well, they lost over 40 million consumer account information. So that is that can completely get avoided if they protect their data more carefully. So that is one way to effectively deter the cybercrime by punishing the victim, like big data producers and big data processors and controllers. Another way is simply improving the networking infrastructure of your country. Because right now the network cannot do a good job to monitor or record the criminal evidence of those hackers or cyber criminals. Therefore, we are lack of evidence to successfully convict them later on. That create problem for our society. That's why we observe on the current network platform, there are just a huge amount of cyber crimes right now.
Okay. And, I remember seeing that one thing is that victims of cybercrime actually invest less in security.
Yes.
Why do you think that is? Because
yeah, sometimes it's hard to get the reason why they are facing such a huge risk, why they don't invest sufficient amount of money to protect those data. So that's kind of related to the cost and benefit analysis in economics. So what is interesting, let me give you a very simple example. Suppose you are, I know you perhaps already have the antivirus software installed on your computer, right? You have some antivirus software on your laptop. But even with such protection, hacker can still easily breach into your computer. But why don't people do more than installing those, like just regular antivirus software? Because it's going to be costly and require a lot of expertise to protect the data, the personal data further. So because the cost is tremendous, and those tremendous costs can only bring in very little benefit from those investment. Therefore, people just give up. So if you view the cybercrime as a contest between the hacker and the victim, so whoever devote a more effort into this contest can win this contest. Then, so for the victims, the effort is not as effective as the hackers, because we just lack of knowledge. We are not kind of experienced. Like we don't study computer science. We are not expert in coding. So therefore, hackers' effort is much more effective than us. So when we devote effort to protect our data, it will be very costly, and we just get very little benefit from it. Therefore, sometimes we just give up. Or even to the big company, even they derive a huge amount of benefit from protecting those data or from using those consumer data. Sometimes the cost of protecting, or say the marginal cost of protecting those data is just tremendous. Sometimes they are just careless, or they just give up.
Yeah, from what you were saying, it sounds a bit as though probability kind of goes into it. So I guess I wouldn't invest in more than antivirus software because the probability of my getting hacked is lower. And so like the cost of paying for it would just happen. But also in the case of big companies like JSTOR, it would make more sense for them because they have a lot to lose. Okay.
Right. So punishing them provide them a huge amount of incentive to protect the consumer data.
And I know your work, this paper is more online crime based, but I was wondering if you had anything that you could take away from your work for the general incarceration system. So I know, I think you just said that the Harvard hacker got punished much more than a physical crime person would, which is quite counterintuitive. So yeah, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, so according to our paper, according to our model, our suggestion is to not punishing the cyber criminals. Instead, we punish the victim, who are the big data processors and controllers, to provide them incentive to better protect consumer data. To generalize our model, will this kind of punishment structure or penalty structure can be applied to other crimes or other situations. So think about, in our model, one key assumption is the hackers, those cyber criminals, after they successfully breach into your system, they will leave very few evidence afterward. Therefore, the severe punishment cannot deter them, will only make them more carefully when they attempt such crime. Because if they can avoid being detected by the security system, they will not be punished, and they can get a criminal benefit from breaching your system. Okay, so that's a huge difference between the cyber crime and the traditional crime. For traditional crime like murder or robbery, after the crime, after they have done the crime, there will be eyewitness. There will be some evidence like fingerprints at the criminal scene. So with those evidence, you still can successfully convict them afterward. But for cyber crimes, like when if you cannot detect them while those cyber criminals attempting the crime, they will not leave too much evidence afterward. So once you realize your system got breached, it is too late. You already missed the best timing to collect evidence in order to catch them and convict them. So that's why severe punishment may work for those traditional crimes such as robbery, sexual assault, or murder, because they have evidence afterward. But for the cybercrime, just the lack of evidence, if you cannot detect them while they're attempting the crime, it's very hard to convict them eventually. So severe punishment may work very well for traditional crimes in order to deter those criminal behaviors. But the severe punishment on cyber crimes is not as cannot do as well, because just simply because they will make the hacker work more carefully when they are attempting the crime. How to explain this? So it's related to, before I mentioned, you can treat the interaction between the victim and the hacker as a contest. So imposing a severe penalty on hacker just enlarge hackers, the value difference between winning and losing to a hacker. Mm-hmm. Because if the hacker wins this contest, he will get the criminal benefit, which is the data. And also he can avoid being punished, right? But if the hacker loses the contest, the hacker will be punished, but he will not get the data he wanted. Therefore, increasing the penalty will enlarge the difference between winning and losing to the hacker. So when losing this contest is can lead to a severe punishment, like even more severe than murder or other violent crime, then the hacker will get a lot of incentive from this penalty structure to work more carefully, to be more cautious while attempting the crime. So we don't want to create a penalty system, a penalty structure that provides the criminal the incentive to do better, right? So we want to provide incentive for the whole system to get improved, to protect the data better, not to provide incentive for the hacker, for the criminal, for the offender to do better. So that's what my paper with Dr. Nielsen suggests.
Okay. Was there any research that was there anything that you found in your research process that you found surprising or that you weren't expecting?
Oh, we were very surprising because so we just compared to the existing papers in law and economics or economics of crime. Until now, for most of the papers, they just assume that the criminals can only get punished after getting the criminal benefit, after they have done the crime. But very few papers look at the case that what if the criminal can only be caught or convicted when we detect them during the crime. So when we change this assumption, we will think it a little bit different. We get the very opposite conclusion to the existing literature. The existing literature, especially in theory, they all suggest severe punishment can effectively deter criminals. But our paper just get the opposite conclusion. For the crimes such as cyber crimes, they are different than the traditional ones because the platform is different. How we detect, how we collect evidence, all the things are different. So when the environment is not the same, the severe punishment will lose the deterrence power. That's the surprising part of this paper. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. When I read it, I was actually really. Yeah, I thought, how is this possible as well?
Right. It's just because the crimes are different than before. So for traditional crimes, you can in this reality, you can easily leave many evidence in the criminal scene, and we also have many technology we can use to detect them, or collect evidence in the real world. But for the online platform, in the virtual world, right now we just lack of the technology, we lack of the tools to collect those evidence and to trace the hacker.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, like the internet, it creates a whole new set of laws and rules and punishment.
Right. But think about eventually. So before we have a lot of traditional crimes, right? And right now those numbers are decreasing each year. Why? Maybe because some of them are moving online.
Yeah.
Yeah, and once we develop new tools to catch those online criminals, cyber criminals, they may find a new platform which can bring them a huge amount of advantage to do crime. So the world is evolving. Also, so does the crime. So whenever the platform get evolved, we need to just think a little bit more about how to prevent those bad things from happening. It takes time and the effort to develop those tools.
Yeah, one thing I actually found strange was that by increasing the cost of losing, cyber criminals, they don't get deterred, but instead they're just more motivated to commit a crime. Whereas,
Right, they're motivated.
reality, if I were to steal something and the penalty was increased, I would be less likely to steal something.
Right. So I think the difference is because to cyber criminals, breaching a system can bring them a huge amount of benefit. But to you, probably you can just derive very little benefit from it. Right. So when they can get a huge amount of benefit from attempting the crime, then they will have a huge incentive to do so. So punishment cannot easily deter them. And especially if the punishment can make them more cautious, devoting more effort to increase the successful rate of attempting the crime, then it will make the system worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I just have one final question. Even though
sure.
We've kind of half answered it, is that what are some other implications of your research? For example, we've already said that punishment of the criminal doesn't work as much in cybercrime. But is it effective in non-cybercrime?
Non-cybercrime. So for, as I mentioned before, for traditional crime, if you can leave a lot of evidence after completing the crime, then severe punishment may work very well on those crimes to deter those criminals. But like for other maybe bad behavior from children, I suggest parents not to use punishment to your children. Maybe you can say something kind of encouraging the good behaviors from your kid. Or you want to set some bottom lines, some principles, or discipline your kid by saying, I love you, so I love you too much to let you maybe eat garbage food, to do some bad things, that perhaps is a more effective way. But to my paper, our model just work very well on the crimes or bad behaviors. You cannot, once they complete such behavior, once they complete such crime, you cannot detect them, or you cannot find evidence to convict them. Our model works on situation more like this.
Yeah, okay. And does that actually work in real traditional crimes where you, for example, if it's a murder and there just is no, so it's a murder, but there's just no evidence? So
if there is a murder, at least you can get the victim's dead body, right?
Yeah.
Right. Then the dead body may contain a lot of evidence, right, of this murder, may provide you a lot of information after the crime.
Okay.
So that's a slightly different because after the murder, after this crime is completed, you still can have some evidence, such as the dead victim, or the murder weapon, or the hair or fingerprints in the crime scene to help you solve the case. But to cybercrime, after they complete the crime, you may have evidence, maybe a fake ID, right? You can trace an ID they use to breach into your system, but that ID may be fake or from a different country. It's very hard to catch those hackers, right?
Yeah. Okay, I see now the difference.
Okay.
Well, thank you for everything. This was a really, really, really interesting conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
So to conclude, we learned about the effect of punishment on criminals and why penalties for traditional crimes don't work for cybercriminals. I was most surprised by how different these traditional and cybercrimes are. As the influence of the internet grows, we have to adapt in new ways. New laws have to be made for cybercrimes, which is exciting because research like Abby's is really important for that. I would like to tell me what you think. If you have any more information or thoughts about the topic, please leave it in the comments. I would also love to hear your suggestions about topics you would like me to cover.